We're joined here today by Jamie Blackport, who was the founder of an enormously successful healthcare data compliance services and technology business in Mirador Analytics. Jamie built and internationally scaled the organisation from his adopted hometown of Melrose in the Scottish Borders, employing highly qualified and sought-after data scientists, privacy scientists, privacy analysts, IT specialists, and marketing professionals, among others, proving the point that you don't have to start your business in an urban environment for it to be a roaring success. So welcome, Jamie. How are you?
Thanks, Ewan. I'm great. Good to be here with you, because I know you've been along that journey with us right from the start. So,
yeah, it's been a very interesting one, and we've watched it with great care and attention. It's been an interesting journey to be part of as well. So, tell me a bit about your background and your upbringing. Obviously, you're not from around here, as they would say.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Scottish accent hasn't developed yet. So I'm a Canadian guy. I lived abroad. Now, I think since 2006. Educationally, I'm a clinically trained pharmacist in Canada. Spent a bunch of time teaching, working in clinical practice, then joined the pharma industry, which is what took me abroad for the first time, and essentially was working on developing medicines for AstraZeneca, and then eventually another pharmaceutical company called Kyowa Kirin. That's what brought me to the Borders, is that company there.
And so how did they come onto your radar, Jamie? What was the story behind that?
Yeah, it's a funny one, because I got a call from a headhunter, a recruiter, said, "Hey, here's this company up in Scotland," and I'd never heard of them before. A company called Prostracan, pharmaceutical company. My life at AstraZeneca at the time was great. I had a great job. I'd been there a long time, but I'd always kind of wondered what the biotech sector was like. And so this company had just been acquired by a Japanese organization. And the Japanese organization had decided they were going to globalize their business. So they acquired this business and then hired me. And my job was to help them think about how to develop their medicines outside of Japan and work with this business in Scotland that happened to be much more sophisticated than I'd originally thought. I'd never heard of them, but they had businesses in 13 countries. They were based in rural Scotland in the Borders. And actually, interestingly enough, the founder of that business was originally a founder of a very successful pharmaceutical company. And he said, if I'm ever going to do it again, I'm going to set up the business where I like to go. And he happened to have a summer house where he'd go fishing on the Tweed. And so when he set up his next business, he set it up on the Tweed. So I moved up here and fell in love with it. It's a beautiful place. Reminds me a lot of where I grew up. The people are friendly. The schools are great. It's a safe place to be. And I just love living here. And so when I decided to eventually set up my own company, when I left that organization, this is where it had to be, in my backyard.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. Interesting kind of, I suppose, path, isn't it? It's a small world in some ways, but in others, it's still interesting to find how people kind of end up in places. What got you interested in life sciences in the first place, when you were a youngster?
Yeah, I think in the first place, Ewan, I was one of those classic people when I was going through my high school education that I had no idea what I wanted to do. I did always know I wanted to do either something medical or something veterinary, one of those two.
Right.
And then, things just worked out in a strange way. I was registered in 10 different universities, took a year off because I didn't know what I wanted to do, scared my parents. I worked road construction, made lots of money. They thought I'd never go back to school. But I realized I didn't want to, drive machines for my whole life. So I eventually went back into life sciences. It happened to be that there was a pharmacist locally that my mom introduced me to that I thought, that's actually a good gig to get into medicine. So I went into pharmacy school, loved it, realized as much as I liked school, I didn't want to keep going for another 9 to 12 years if I decided to go into medicine and specialize. So I thought I'd go out and work in clinical practice. And clinical practice was great. I worked in a retail practice, and 6 months in was managing the store. I also worked in a hospital practice, was kind of running the hospital pharmacy in the oncology area, 6 months in, and then realized what's next. Was this life? And that's actually what took me into life sciences companies.
How did you get involved in I suppose, a business as opposed to perhaps, a business like that, as opposed to kind of retail organization?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you go back to my schooling, so I was in pharmacy school. I grew up in Western Canada, pharmacy school in Western Canada, pharmaceutical in the center or east coast of Canada. And they had summer programs where you could go and work there and see what a pharmacist would do. And at that time, it was always that pharmaceutical companies were the big, evil companies. And I thought I should go and see what that is, because it's probably not quite the case. So I went and worked in one of those for Astra before it became AstraZeneca, and loved it. There's a lot of cool places for a pharmacist to work. I was very head set on clinical practice, so that's why I went the path I did in clinical practice. But as I started to realize that, hey, like, what am I going to do next? That's when the company actually came back to me. Astra came back to me and said, hey, do you want to come and join us? I joined them for a while, continuing to do my clinical practice, which was great. I did some teaching at university, loved it. But as I did that, I realized I really want to get into drug development. So for me, it was around, my journey was, hey, how do I help as many patients as I can, which is what I was doing in my community practice and hospital practice. But then I realized, hey, if I could help develop medicines, I can help even more people. And that's what the first draw was, to move into development work.
How, I suppose, did you develop from that type of role into a more commercially kind of orientated role, as it were, in time?
Yeah, it was interesting because for me, like my role in the drug development work was the interface between the commercial organization and the scientific organization. So I was like right in the middle. So I was trying to say, hey, what do patients in the real world want? What do physicians in the real world want? Share that with the researchers, and then try and figure out, okay, how do we make this viable at the same time commercially? So my job was kind of always in the middle, kind of one foot in both camps, kind of helping with the strategy for like, if we could develop this great technology, where's the fit for it? And how do we develop that?
Interesting. And so obviously a very successful career at AstraZeneca, a knock on the door, or a tap on the shoulder, and another very successful spell at Kyowa Kirin. What was the idea behind Mirador Analytics? And had it been fermenting for a while? What did you do?
Yeah, I love it. It's a great question. And I think if I reflect back on my career, my entire career, I wanted to set up a business. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Literally from when I graduated pharmacy school, I almost bought a pharmacy with a coworker. Our idea was we would make it a great place for people to come and spend time, have a coffee shop as a part of it. We never did it. And then as my career went on, I wanted to start various different companies. Never did it. I was always chasing the next job, the next experience to make me stronger and better when I became an entrepreneur, which continued for the better part of 20 years until my wife, who I met in Scotland, she's Scottish. And as we were sitting down one day, I was talking about I wanted to start a company and I really need to do it. But I need to do this next job thing. And she said, why don't you just do it? Like, start a company, just do it. You're not overly happy where you're at. Why don't you just do it and be in control? So I did. And mantra number one for me was, I didn't want to have a boss. I didn't want to be a slave to investors either. So I set up the business with that in mind. And it kind of progressed from there.
Did you feel like you were kind of, skilling up yourself, across that period, and always skilling yourself up rather than just taking the plunge? So waiting for the next, absolute kind of skill to manifest itself in your capabilities, and then I'll take the plunge. Were you putting it off, pushing it into the future, sort of thing?
That exactly was what it was, Ewan. And I just needed that push from my wife to do it. And, in retrospect, would I have loved to have done it earlier? Probably. But at the same time, I also realized, well, actually, what I did was because of what I am, because of the skill set I built. And literally, I spend every day today using skills that I learned in the corporate world when I was in the corporate world today. So, to me, having that, starting a business is tricky, right? It's one, a good idea. Two, being brave enough to do it. Three, you have to get a little bit lucky. And then four, you have to surround yourself by great people. That's where you came into the equation, is helping us find great people, and creating that culture. But all those things kind of need to be right. And for me, the mix was the right at the right time. And the ride was, very successful and very quick. And it probably wouldn't have been that way if I didn't have the experience from the past. I was able to see around some corners. That's probably the best way to describe it. Before things hit you.
Yeah, absolutely. We obviously know it came from zero, but where did you? What was the kind of time scale, and from inception to kind of exit with Mirador?
Yeah, like inception was, properly in 2017. We properly rolled out. I think you helped place our first person in, was it 2017 or was it 2018?
I think it's very late 2017. I think we kind of got involved, something like that. Yeah, early days.
So that helps me remember exactly the timelines, because it was
Our
early.
beards weren't as grey.
That's definitely much greater now. Yeah, when I started in early 2017, it was just me and a couple people. We're still very close to me today. And that's an interesting thing with founders. And you can say, hey, why does the founder always bring the people from the beginning with them? You can see why, because there's just, I trust some of my early employees with my life. And then as we started to then think so we started, and actually just to wind back a little bit, what we did is we started the business doing, my background was strategic drug development. So we were helping American companies understand that Europe's not one country. There's different pricing in each country, and you have to do different things, and there's different standard of care in different countries. We're doing the same for Asia. And that was going fine. My whole mission in the beginning was I didn't want to borrow money. So I did it out of my pocket, sort of like using the bootstrap technology or the terminology that people would use. It was out of my back pocket using kind of my savings. And we used the consulting work that we were doing to pay the bills. And I'd always sort of thought, where will the business go in future? I don't know, but we need to keep our eyes open. Don't keep the blinkers on and look for that opportunity. And the opportunity did come. So there was, someone who I was connected to through another business colleague who I got along with, just offered as I started the business to say, this is going to be way harder than you think it is. And not unless you're right, like that, there's no doubt about it. I'd visions of like forecasting millions in the first few years and realize actually it is a lot harder. And he said, why don't we just talk every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and I'll give you some advice. And so I did. I'd ask him questions, he'd give me advice. Some of it was good, some of it was what I considered okay. I laugh when I say that because he's a very good friend of mine now. But one day he called me and complained about an issue that was happening in the market. Essentially what our business does is we ensure that as data is connected and used, healthcare data, that is done appropriately to the laws, and that risk is appropriately maintained and managed for patients, while still trying to keep some utility in that data. And he explained that in the US market, there was 5 people doing this work. And I couldn't understand it. Having all my history of working with healthcare data in the US, there's no way there should be people. It should be dozens and dozens of companies doing this work to make sure that data is adequately de-identified. And no, it was only people. So he said there's a major issue and that needs to be solved. Now, he also happened to be the co-founder of a company that created technology to connect healthcare data together. So he was making it so the healthcare data was growing much, much faster. There was huge desire and need to see healthcare data connected together to get better insights. And he needed someone to be able to say, hey, this data is okay. So we did an experiment. So this was coming back to that first year. The experiment we did was to answer 3 questions. One, can we do it? Because I'm not an expert on the identification of data. I'm not a statistician. I'm not any of the technologically savvy people that we've hired. I can't write code. I run a tech company and I can't write code. So can we do it? The second question was really important to me. Do I like doing it? And the third question is, could we scale? Because it made no sense to me, like back to how many people are doing it, that there weren't dozens of companies doing it. It had to be hard to scale. So we did that pilot. That's about when you placed our first person. It was amazing. It was one of those people I would trust my life with every second of the day. He helped us, answer that. And at the end of that first year, we said yes, yes, and yes. The second question formed the value proposition, what made us different in the market, because we actually said to our customers, hey, what do you want to do with your data? I don't want to oversimplify privacy, but it's very easy to make something private as long as you slash really deep. And then as a result, you have very little utility out of it. So we started with the reverse to say, what do you want to do with the data? And then let's figure out a privacy strategy that lets you do that. That was revolutionary in the market. People wanted to work with us. We also happen to do things a lot faster than others, than the individuals in the market. And then we were able to scale. So we figured that out. So that's to your question, the scaling part. We started, like I said, that first person in 2017 being hired in by yourself. And then we exited in late 2021 with 48 people. So literally a 4-year ride from inceptions to exit. And And now I'm still working with the organization that has acquired us. That group is north of 120 people now. And coming back to one of the things we talked about is the technological side of it being really important, is the organization that acquired us was saying, hey, let's help you put some technology in to automate what you're doing so we don't have to keep scaling people as much as possible. And that's where we are today. So it was a very quick inception to exit.
And what was your biggest challenge then, I suppose, or what gave you sleepless nights in those early days? The fact that money was coming out of your back pocket, I'm assuming, was
That's part of it.
interesting one.
Yeah, I think what was interesting, Ewan, is like, and for any founder, entrepreneur, or early stage company that can find a pocket that's very unique for yourself, that's unusual. Like we literally, my business development strategy was answer emails and phone calls, and then try and slow play people as we scaled. Because our value proposition is we asked people they want to do with their data, and we said, you can do it. We can do it much faster. As a matter of fact, our initial pricing strategy was the faster you want it, the more you pay. That was our strategy.
Okay.
So I was doing is keeping the lid on the bubbling pot. So that was fear number one, is like, we need to somehow be able to stay true to those customers and be able to deliver on our value proposition of utility and speed, but also be able to serve the market and be able to scale. So scaling was an issue. And then as a result, when it's funded out of your back pocket, you have to be very intelligent of how you scale. Managing cash flow in a startup business is really, really tricky. And it doesn't matter. And we literally had no competition. There was customers knocking down the door, but we were trying to say, how do we scale in an efficient possible way that doesn't, break our finances? And so those literally were the two major things. And it was so tricky, actually. You and I always reflect with my wife, is like, we were on top of it, and I had run big businesses before, but it still sneaks up on you. So there was one month where I sold a car just to make payroll for the company. Did I have to do it to make payroll? Probably not, but I wanted to make sure I had enough buffer in the bank. And there was also a discussion with my wife to say, hey, when are you going to start paying yourself? Which was probably, the third part of that question. Was able to extract money for yourself as a founder is a bit tricky. It was always the next headcount. Ewan's got to find me another person. I've got to keep going. So it took me literally almost 3 years to start paying myself.
Really?
Yeah. And I think to me that was the challenging part, even though we were growing like crazy, is just how do you make sure you can continue the growth that keeps people happy and lets you run the business in the appropriate way. And then I guess the final equation on that is like making sure that you have the right people when you scale. It was really, really tricky. I think for us, like we had a very rigid hiring policy, which I know you know very well, but the audience doesn't. When we were hiring data scientists to be our privacy experts, there was a test created by who's now our chief data scientist. I had a tiny bit of help in it, and literally that test had so I think the fail rate's anywhere between 94 and 97%. When someone made it through that, then what we needed to is to make sure they were a cultural fit. Now, the good thing is in our partnership with you, is you found cultural fit people before we put them through the test, and then we were just checking that. But what we wanted to do is to make sure that we had a very, very special place to work. And even after acquisition, I think we have a very, very special place where we have a lot of people who are fairly new in their careers, most of them that we've trained up, some not so new, have been around like myself, but it is an unusual place where the person is really taken care of. And once you have that kind of formula, that allowed us to really make sure that we were scaling appropriately. And we didn't give on any of those. We didn't give on. So we would rather take the pain. Well, I would rather take the pain. The team sometimes had a hard time with it, not having the people to make sure we waited for the right people.
Well, you were then able, I suppose, very much to kind of leverage on that fabulous culture. When anybody came into the business, they were almost without exception bought in. So there was very little rejection, I suppose, at a kind of latter stage in the process. Was there? You'd bought them in, and the test was famously tough.
Yeah, I think doing one of these, like when I look back, it's like in that first 4 years, almost nobody left, and the people who left, and I can remember clear as anything. One left to go, do a postdoc that he never thought he'd get. Another person was inspired by the work we did to say, I'm going to go do a PhD in this area of medicine, which I thought was amazing. And so we had people leaving for amazing reasons, to grow and better themselves. I remember we had legal counsel who left to be able to go do a very cool thing in law. That's the first time it's ever happened in Scotland, these sorts of things. So to me, those were quite inspirational things, which told us we had a really special kind of culture, where at the same time, people also called their friends and said, hey, you should come work here. It's a good place to be. And I think so much of it is, using the analogy of a family. Like I always describe it as a family. The team was like a family. It's what I call the functional family. Functional families, they say when something's wrong, people will die when something's wrong, and then you figure out a way to get through it, but you still stick to it. And I think to me, that was a very cool thing. And I still love when a new person starts today, the team like puts their arms around them and say, hey, welcome to the family. This is how it works. We're going to help you. If you have questions, let me know. I always used to joke that they would always point out like who the crazy uncle is in the family as well too. Which is normally the founder, who's a little bit crazy, and just kind of help people in the journey with the company, which is quite unusual. It's a place where education and most of the people, as you kind of alluded to in the intro, are very highly educated people. Most have PhDs, master's degrees. I love exploring the unknown and love working in teams of people, but still having some autonomy to do your own work. So they just help new people come along in that journey.
Yeah, I think they were avowedly evangelical about their experience with you guys. I mean, that was the reality of it, and it was lovely going on calls, coming down to see you and seeing those people, really having flourished and having built amazing kind of careers and being entirely bought into the whole kind of vision of what you were doing. It was brilliant.
Yeah, and I think, Ewan, one of my favorite things, like now that we've been here a little bit longer than those few years, is just seeing the career path of some of those people. Some of the team who came in the early days, I actually remember one person in particular was a student who came from a university, who came on a summer program, spent time with us. She now leads the delivery part of our organization, has like 40 some people reporting to her. I could say her salary has like quadrupled or 5 since she's gone. And she just grows and flourishes. So like to me, even after being acquired, my favorite thing is being able to say, I'm here for 2 reasons. One is we've got a really tough job, like enhancing privacy in healthcare data. It's a scientific area that just hasn't advanced. Certainly not at the rate of how healthcare data has in the technology. So we need to catch up. And there's a lot of hard problems to solve. How do we integrate genomic data, so that people can access it for research? How do you deal with things such as COVID so that you have quick access to really important information while still protecting people's identity? Those are really hard things to solve for. So I'm here to help with that. I think I have some value still to the organization, how we solve this. But then I also think, how do you grow people? My job, as whether it was a founder or a CEO or now leading the business in the way that I do, my job is to basically find great people and find really interesting ways to grow and stretch them. And so when something really cool comes along, give someone a big charter, create some space for them, and create a framework to let them do it, and just let them go, like unleash them, support them through that process. And it literally is amazing when you take someone who has the right mindset and the right basic skill set in the background, how quickly they can grow and explode in. It's like, to me, that's the thing I love about being in a bigger company, is you can do that. In a small company, you've got 10,000 hats and everyone's trying to do, and you can really grow into some very cool things. But in a bigger company, if you can create that same kind of environment, you can really do some things. Because the investment is easier to get than it is in an early stage startup.
Yeah. I suppose there are kind of challenges, even from a kind of affordability point of view, in earlier stage companies and so on and so forth, and perhaps there are some of those bigger ones. But there's also that kind of agility that you've got at an early stage. And I think, you can certainly look at a number of folks who work in your organization now, who have really benefited from, just being in that environment where creation, is happening. And I think, Mirador's been a great example of that for any number of folks, actually, to be fair. So, yeah, lovely. What did you do to take the business from that idea? You kind of answered this a little bit anyway, but from an idea to commercial viability. So was it really just that kind of point at which you came across the problem, highlighted, because you were all already commercially viable, but you just saw a big problem, a big opportunity, kind of to take the resources that you'd already built into something that was clearly, a great opportunity. I'm trying not to answer my own question here.
Yeah, and I think I did cover some of it before, but I think if I look at it, the very basic sense is, keep your eyes open, keep the blinders off, so that you can kind of see where opportunity presents, but be focused on how you're going to create revenue. That's super, super important for any new business. How do you create revenue, and how do you do it in a way that's recurring? And I don't mean recurring from a multiples and evaluation perspective, but just so that in your business that money's coming in every month instead of having pulses of money. So to me, we're very focused on that while we look for the other opportunity. And then when we saw this other opportunity, I said, we took a year to do a pilot to make sure we could do it, that we could scale it. Well, no, so that I like doing it. But I think as we did that, I always have a motto to go slow. You have to go slow to go fast. And that's what we did. When we found the thing that we thought could be cool, let's go slow so we can go fast. One is the technological thing. Could we solve it? Could we do it? And two is, let's make sure we're building the right business model around it. How do we make sure that we, make it viable for us as a business and we can scale appropriately? And I'd love to say it was utopian. It was perfect. It wasn't. We made tons of mistakes in the way. But that being said, I think to me, it was just super important that, when you find that area that you're interested in, to make sure you take a little bit of time and get it right. Experiment a little bit. Now, that's counter to how some founders work, is they just want to get it out there and go crazy and learn from what's in the market. My approach, simply because it was out of my back pocket, was let's make some money, let's get something that's coming in, and then let's get the other thing right. And when we got that right, it literally was a rocket ship, that we were just trying to hold on to. It was really kind of the approach.
If you had the opportunity to go back and tell yourself, or give yourself advice on the journey, it's kind of 2017 again, what would that advice be?
Yeah, I would say, I think as an entrepreneur and a founder, I'm pretty good about giving people your autonomy and go with it. I think I'm pretty good at doing that. That being said, I would reflect on myself to be faster at doing that before.
Right. Okay. That's interesting.
I think if I was to do it again, I would probably make sure you find the right people. And that's the hard part in the beginning, is making sure you've got the right people. But if you're doing it another time, you probably are using some similar people, or you at least learn that, but then let it go faster. So I'm going to counter to what I said in the last question, go slow to go fast. And the second time, it's let some people go fast. Probably take a few more shots on goal versus, and just let it go a little quicker. Because I think the learning I've had is it's amazing how much people can accomplish if you give them the room to do it. And what typically can happen for a lot of founders and startup companies, how I know, is the founder wants to be on top of everything and needs to be kind of blesses things and, knows everything. I don't have that capability. I realized as we were scaling, I just couldn't do that. I'm not that capable, so I had to choose my battles. But when I go back to say, if you're to do it again, or if you're starting up, is really trust people and be really clear to them as to what's important, but then let them do it. To me, that's what I would tell myself, is let it go a little faster.
Finally, what's the plan for the future?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is I talked before about how it took me a long, long time to become an entrepreneur in my career. It's not the last time that stuff's going to happen. I've got lots of ideas. I think to me though, I'm so driven now around making a difference. And that's my whole career path, has been how do you make a difference to people's health? That's my whole career path. And what I do see is there are huge problems still to be solved. Like what our business has done, for example, it's been entirely US focused. And what I see is an incredible opportunity for other countries, and we could say Europe, you could say, UK attached to Europe, however you want to describe that. You could say, Asian markets, etc. There's a real opportunity for organizations to say, hey, how do I take privacy data and use it for real good for healthcare, to help with healthcare data and research. I think, I speak to people all the time around times of COVID. And I remember speaking to some people in a large European country, and I'm not going to even say which one, who basically said we couldn't tell who had COVID as a government. We could not tell who had COVID, where, how sick they were. We just couldn't pull healthcare data together. That to me is, one, is scary, but also two, just show we're not doing the best for patients' health long term. So to me, I know I'll always work in healthcare. I know I will always be at the intersection of privacy and trying to make data better. And at the same time, I'm lucky enough that I can also dabble in some other stuff. So, I have a strong interest in, ecological restoration and nature and trying to do other things. And, as much as Scotland is a beautiful place to be, it could be more beautiful. It could be like it was years ago. And so we're doing a lot of work in that space. So for me, what's next? I can't exactly say, but I know I'll be touching all of those various things. But at the same time, and coming back to people, like at the core of it is like staying connected to all those people helped grow it. And I think that still is one of my favorite things, now inside an organization, working with that team, trying to help explode them. Some of the people who've left and are doing other things, also helping them, and seeing what I can do to help them in some small way. Because I think, we talked about the great beer. It's like my time is not past, but it's coming later in their career path. And some people are still, the future will be shaped by the younger generation, right? So how do you help that generation? So I'm also focused on that sort of, mentorship of people who I've come across. And then my final bit that I'm also doing is like, I love living here. I love Scotland. We'll talk about the ecological part, but it's also the businesses and supporting other startups and other founders. I love doing that sort of thing, getting involved in some of the investing networks or some other groups, helping other people who are along the journey. And I would say you could say I was successful, in our journey as a startup and exit. And I think we did a lot of great things to get there, but we're also a little bit lucky, right? So, and we're able to see around some corners before they hit us. So to me, it's just trying to help other people in a similar situation see around some corners.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Blackport. A very insightful conversation that I'm sure will inspire lots of other budding entrepreneurs and so on. But I know you're obviously, and you've just mentioned it, an active angel investor, getting behind young, exciting companies as it stands just now too, which is great. And I think, if you can offer up as generously as you do, some of those kind of seeing round corner anticipation, of kind of opportunities, problems, issues, and so on and so forth, then I think that's a hugely valuable thing for folks to get, isn't it? And on a personal note, thank you very much for being a wonderful client and an advocate of Ewan Jardine. Over the years, we've been very privileged to work with you and hugely enjoyed our part in your journey. So, thank you.
It's absolute pleasure, and I know I've connected you to some other organizations and, on a similar event, because I think finding trusted partners as you start up businesses and scale them is also very, very tricky. And as I've said many times in this conversation, people are the heart of the business. And so finding partners who can bring you the right people and support that is like absolutely integral to success. And I describe you guys as part of the special sauce that grew our company, right? So, so to me, finding people like that in Scotland is not that easy, or you helped us fill people across the UK. But finding trusted partners in an area that I would say like your field sometimes gets a bad rap for how companies behave. Your company is quite special. So
thank you very much.
Thank you and your team for helping us get to where we got.
Well, that's very kind of you to say so. And I think The best aspect of working for or with a client like Mirador Analytics is that you're working with people who are going to get a huge amount out of the experience of working for you, and it then in turn gives us a purpose. We're not there to put bums on seats. We're changing people's lives in our own way. So thanks for being part of that.